Ukraine says it has destroyed 4 of Russia's most sophisticated air defense systems with a blitz on occupied Crimea, but warned that the world is careering towards World War III unless Kyiv gets more weapons to defeat Russia.
Kyiv again, and this is the scene of yet another. We're in Kyiv again.
My name is Jerome Starkey. I'm the defence editor at The Sun newspaper, and this is Frontline, your weekly roundup of the most important news from the war in Ukraine. We're going to start with Ukraine's successful strike on the Jankoi airbase in occupied Crimea, where today Ukraine's military intelligence unit said that they destroyed 4 S-400 air defense systems, as well as 3 supporting radar stations and 2 command and control units. Now, this is significant because the S-400 is Russia's most advanced air defense system. It is what protects its military, its headquarters, its assets from Ukrainian air assault. And the S-400 is formidable. It's a system that many NATO countries' military experts consider to be on par with any of the best air defense systems in the world. Now, this one in Jankoi was destroyed in northeastern occupied Crimea, apparently by a barrage of US-supplied ATACMS missiles. Those are the Army tactical missile systems which can be fired from HIMARS or GMLRS multiple launch rocket system supplied both by the UK and by the United States. These have a range of about 190 miles, and that is well beyond the front line. So effectively, this could have been fired almost from as far away as Dnipro, well inside Ukrainian-controlled territory. Exactly how Ukraine managed to hit this air defense system is unclear. Of course, the very nature of air defense batteries means that they should be able to defend themselves, because those radars should detect the incoming threat and then launch missiles to intercept it. And that's why it's valuable, an important victory for Ukraine, because it could potentially leave other targets in occupied Crimea vulnerable to further attacks. Worth noting while we're on this subject that Ukraine's GUR military intelligence unit has also claimed a number of strikes deep inside Russia, many hundreds of kilometers inside Russian territory, including one on what is known as an S-9B6 container over the horizon radar, effectively radar early warning system. Now, the word container is perhaps misleading. This isn't contained within what we might think of a shipping container. Actually, it's made up of dozens, almost 150 antennas spread over a field up to 5 stories high that can detect aircraft and missiles more than 3,000 kilometers away. Unclear if that attack has been successful, but nonetheless there does appear to be a trend in these attacks that Ukraine is targeting Russia's radars, early warning systems, trying to degrade its air defenses. In both cases, that would leave Russia vulnerable to further attacks. The GU are also suggesting that they try to attack a Shahed drone factory inside Russian territory. Despite the grinding nature of the conflict in Ukraine, Ukraine has maintained, indeed grown, this extraordinary capacity to launch strikes deep behind Russian lines, significant because they are trying to degrade Russia's defences and also degrade, as we've seen in this latest strike, Russia's manufacturing capability. In this instance, the Shahed factory, those are the Iranian drones, but which are now being made under license by Russia in Russia. Of course, it comes after many weeks of strikes on Russian oil refining capabilities. Again, part of that same Ukrainian strategy of trying to degrade Russian resources, sap Moscow's ability to fight. It hasn't been one way, though. What we've seen in Ukraine is a continuing barrage of Russian airstrikes. Most recently, a particularly deadly attack on the northern city of Chernihiv, northeast of Kyiv, near the Russian border, a city that came under ferocious attack in the first few weeks of the war, and because of its proximity to Russia, has never really been spared the violence over the last 2+ years. At least 17 people killed in that missile barrage, dozens, scores, I think up to 60 wounded at the last count. And comment from President Zelensky saying that, had Ukraine had the air defense weapons that he has asked for, the air defense weapons that so many in Ukraine are so adamant that they need, then those 17 people would still be alive. Those 60 people would not have been injured. This sort of attack would have been defeated. That message of Ukraine needing more weapons has been repeated today by Ukraine's Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal. Now, his warning was stark. Without the resources that Ukraine needs to defend itself against Russia, to defeat Russia, he said the world is facing World War III. And this is, the logic is that if Russia is victorious in Ukraine, if an emboldened Russia captures Ukraine, it will continue to threaten other countries in Europe. Shmyhal said that the global system of security will crumble. We will see a proliferation of conflicts in Europe and around the world that will ultimately plunge the world into an almost unimaginable conflict on the scale of which the world has never seen before, because whilst there have been world wars in the past, they have never been fought with the sort of weapons available to the major powers today. There is, however, a glimmer of hope for Ukraine on the prospect of receiving the weapons and resources that it needs. And of course, that all hangs on the plans, or hangs on the Republicans in the House of Congress in America passing a White House bill to supply $60 billion worth, or about £50 billion worth of weapons and military aid. That has been stalled since December. We've talked about that a lot on these Frontline updates. The bill is once again before Congress, and they expect to have a vote within the next couple of days, possibly on April 20th. Now, there's been a lot of wrangling. We've seen President Joe Biden writing an op-ed in an American newspaper stressing the importance of why this is needed. Last week, we talked about the diplomacy of Ukraine and America's international allies, Japan, Poland, the United Kingdom, all stressing how important it is for America to step up and supply that money to keep Ukraine in the fight so it can defend itself. Of that $60 billion, it's sort of broadly broken down. About $24 billion of it would go to replenishing US military stocks, which may have been gifted to Ukraine already, or to enable America to gift existing hardware to Ukraine and then replace it. About $14 billion would go on new military equipment for Ukraine, and about $11 billion would go to supporting ongoing American military operations which are supporting Ukraine. Those aren't specified, but understanding, for example, that could include the Global Hawk drone flights over the Black Sea, over international airspace, over international waters in the Black Sea, which are gathering intelligence and other forms of intelligence gathering, for example, from satellites. That sort of intelligence has been key to Ukraine in the past, particularly finding and allowing it to find and destroy high-value Russian targets, perhaps, I'm speculating here, but perhaps including Russian warships in the Black Sea, where Ukraine has had some of its most spectacular successes. As ever, if you do have questions, any questions you'd like me to try and answer, please write them in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, and we will do our best to answer them next time. Loads of questions from last week. I'm going to pick out 3. The first one is, where is Europe? We talked a lot last time about the importance of this American aid. A lot of you asking, understandably, well, if America's not providing the aid, well, where is Europe? And it's a fair question. Europe has actually donated significantly more to Ukraine over the last 2 years than America. According to a tally produced by the Kyiv Institute, Europe has committed $144 billion worth of aid compared to America's 68 billion. Other countries have contributed about 40 billion. Now, in terms of military aid alone, America has committed the most, some $42 billion. Germany is second with about just shy of 18 billion, and the United Kingdom third with about $9 billion worth of military aid. But what's also really interesting is when you start to look at this in terms of percentage of GDP. Now, we've also talked about the pressure within NATO for NATO members to spend a certain amount of their GDP on defence, and that is seen within the alliance as a sort of fair way of splitting the costs, sharing the burden of collective defence. Now, when you look at aid to Ukraine relative to GDP, then actually you get a very different story. America is in fact 32nd down the league table in terms of how much it has spent on Ukraine relative to its GDP. That analysis by the Kyiv Institute saying America has committed 0.32% of its GDP to supporting Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion. That's compared to Estonia, top of the table, which has spent 4%. Denmark, second, has spent 3%. United Kingdom 26th on that list, having spent about 0.5% of its own GDP on Ukraine. So there are many ways of, slicing this particular salami, many ways of looking at the statistics, but the money, the key point here is that the money from America, the $60 billion from America, is vital. It is a huge tranche of money. It's effectively doubling what America has already committed. It will sit alongside huge quantities from America, even bigger quantities from Europe, and of course money from countries that are outside the European Union. Second question from last week was quite a technical one. It was talking about the ground-launched small diameter glide bombs and whether or not these would be effective or would be well used trying to hit particularly rail lines, but Russian supply routes from Russian soil across southern Ukraine to occupied Crimea. That is a patch of territory often referred to as the land bridge to Crimea. The short answer is yes, these bombs have a range of about 94 miles. That would place much of that territory, that land bridge, within their range. And indeed, when Ukraine launched its counteroffensive last summer, that much vaunted counteroffensive where it pushed south from Zaporizhia, one of the key objectives, as I was led to believe by both Western and Ukrainian officials, was to try and get its artillery within the range of those key supply routes across the land bridge, effectively to try and cut those supply routes, to choke Russian forces in occupied Crimea. What I can't tell you with certainty is whether or not those weapons are being used for that purpose, and if why perhaps they're not being used more. It may well be to do with the defences that Russia has in that territory and the opportunities Russia may have to strike the launch sites. We know the launch sites can be mobile and quickly mobile, but nonetheless, again, speculating, it could be linked to the strikes we've seen on the air defences. Those air defences may well leave aircraft, including helicopters, more vulnerable. We know that Russian helicopters in southern and central Ukraine, but sort of around Kherson and Zaporizhia, have played a really important role in sort of hampering Ukraine's attempts to push forward, causing problems for Ukrainian forces. A good question. I will try and keep an eye on that and keep you updated on those bombs. The final question today is, why doesn't Britain supply Ukraine with more air defence systems? A constant refrain, we've touched on it today, we've touched on it before, is that Ukraine needs more air defence systems. Point number one is that Britain doesn't actually have a lot of ground-based air defence systems. The UK Armed Forces have supplied Starstreak missiles. Now, these are short range, they can be shoulder-launched missiles, and they can be fired from, we supplied a vehicle known as the HVM, a small sort of light tank, if you like. They're really designed for shooting down low-flying or close-in helicopters. The British Army relies on a Giraffe radar system for its ground-based air defences. That is perhaps broadly equivalent to the US Patriot missile system, but actually The UK, for its longer range air defence, relies on its fleet of Type 45 destroyers, which are armed with Sea Viper, Sea Scepter missiles and a Samson radar, which towers above the ship. I mean, that has a range of some 250 miles that it can see. What we've noticed in the United Kingdom is when there are major events happening here in the capital, London, often one of those ships is brought into the Thames to provide air defence cover, normally done quite quietly and quite discreetly. The UK has sent its Giraffe raiders to Poland, where they're bolstering Poland's air defence and early warning radar capabilities. So the short answer is that Britain doesn't necessarily have enough or the right kit to give Ukraine. And the other point I would add, the final point I will make today, is that Ukraine has been pretty clear that actually what it really needs and wants are the US-made Patriot systems. Now, those systems have so far, as I understand, been the only ones that can shoot down Russia's Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Now, these are the missiles that Vladimir Putin boasted were unstoppable. They have been stopped. They've been stopped by the Patriot systems, and those are the ones that Ukraine so desperately needs. Thank you very much for listening. I'll say it again. If you do have questions and you're watching on YouTube, please write them in the comments below, and I'll have a go at answering some of them next time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to The Sun. And if you're listening to this as a podcast, then don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.